So, anyone would like to ask a question, something you heard or always wondered about this kind of stuff? Yeah.
How come we haven't heard more about this in sort of the popular press or even not so popular press?
Yeah,
Just
why haven't we
thinking
heard more of this in
Yeah.
the secular media?
Right.
Yeah. Well, some of the things that I've described to you are fairly new science. In fact, some of it is so new that, high school textbooks probably haven't incorporated the BVG theory dealing with multiverses needing a beginning or something like that, right? Or why the expanding universe is expanding and accelerating. So I think that, some of it is new. Other parts are that this combination of hard science and philosophy put together is a pretty narrow market, if you will. People like me, I'm interested, I don't know, some other people too, but, there aren't a lot of people who are, theologian physicists, theoretical physicists, but there are some. And that's where some of the handouts, in fact, if you look at the very end of the entire thing here, you can actually take a look at my bibliography. And there's examples in the beginning, Evidence for God from Physics by Father Ron Spitzer, or Father, I forget his first name, but Robert Spitzer. And he even has the Reason series, What Science Says About God. That's for high school programs. It has 5 DVDs, half-hour things. They're awesome. I'm using them in my religion class at Maryvale Academy. I teach high school religion. It's going to be in the science program there, actually, in the next couple of months. I think it ought to be getting more airplay. But what it takes is, people like you spreading the word, saying, hey, we should hear more about this in our schools. We should hear more about this, talk about it. I think that's part of the solution.
Yeah.
Among theoretical physicists, a lot of this stuff is known. And that's why multiverse theories are trying to figure out, well, is there any way to explain this fine-tuning or other things in other ways, besides some kind of intelligent creator, right? Because you're kind of getting boxed in a little bit in terms of your explanations, right? So I think that, part of a lot of the research into these different speculative theories, is motivated by coming to terms with this evidence, trying to explain it in a natural way. And I think it's reasonable to always look for natural explanations. I mean, we should be skeptics about always appealing to a supernatural cause for some phenomenon. But we're starting to get at very primitive, fundamental realities once we have the laws of physics as we know them, and these fundamental constants. There's not a lot of wiggle room for what the source of this is. This is the very lowest level of theoretical physics and cosmology. Whereas we could say that the fact that our Earth is fine-tuned for life, has to be right in exactly the right place. Well, of course it is, because we're here, and there are probably hundreds and thousands of other planets in the universe that could be in a similar situation, because there's so many. But it's really hard to make that argument about the universe as a whole, because we only have evidence for one universe. Multiverse theories are actually totally speculative. It's possible that they could be true, but we don't have any evidence of it. We just have theoretical constructs. Yeah.
Could you maybe comment on the moral obligations part, which you can say?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think it starts from the idea that we have a sense of ought, that we ought to do certain things, that certain things are obligatory, defending the innocent, and certain things are morally wrong in an absolute sense. Directly killing an innocent human being. There's very clear examples of things that are wrong. Violating one's conscience, things like that, are... so we have this sense of moral laws that are somehow outside of us and imposing an obligation on us from outside of us. So that's the first premise of the moral argument. Peter Craig writes, Real moral obligation is a fact. We are really, truly, objectively obligated to do good and to avoid evil. So either the atheistic view of reality is correct, or a religious view, speaking generally, is correct. But the atheistic one is incompatible with there being real moral obligation outside of us. Especially a materialist, naturalist atheism, where basically all we have are particles bouncing around according to different laws. Well, where does the sense of moral obligation come from? If there's nothing immaterial about reality, right? If there's just, why are we obliged to do anything? If all we are is kind of a chance happening construct of, atoms and molecules coming together and evolving into what we are today. Now, I accept theistic versions of evolution. I'm not arguing against evolution. But what I'm arguing against is that if that's all we are, if we're just a material reality with no spiritual component, and there's nothing above us, well then, the only place we could get morality would be from us. So then we can change it. If it's just some social contract, why can't we change what the moral rules are? Why do we have a sense of ought that's different from I want to do this, or I don't want to do that, or I have an opinion about something? And so that, and it can't really come from below us. Is there some law of the universe that says this collection of molecules has to do this? That doesn't really make any sense. It would be kind of a crazy law. So which view of reality is more compatible with this sense of that there really are things that are really wrong and really right? Now, this doesn't get you all the way to a creator of the universe and the triune God of love. It's also compatible with some versions of Platonic idealism, where Plato had this theory of these abstract truths existing outside of us, higher than us, but still not God. So, most atheists of our day are not Platonists, agreeing with this Greek philosopher. But it's not compatible with this materialist atheist view of reality. Now, the relativists are going to say, well, there is no objective right and wrong. They're just going to throw out the idea of moral obligation entirely, right? And say, well, that explains the problem. Just get rid of the problem. There is no moral obligation. But if someone denies that value and goodness are objective, they might say, when I say something is right or wrong, this is grounded in my point of view. It's wrong relative to me, but it might be right relative to somebody else, or from my viewpoint. It's not objectively wrong. I'd never make that statement. I'm a relativist. But if saying X is wrong just means X is wrong for me, or according to me, then it'd be more accurate to say I feel that X is wrong, or X makes me feel icky. It's not a very strong statement. This is not saying very much at all about right and wrong. But people who think that all morality is subjective, relativists, still treat subjective moral opinions very differently than they do subjective atheistic opinions or mere preferences. In other words, they'll get very upset if you try to impose your morality on me. That's wrong. Well, is it? It's not wrong for me. I mean, you can play this game, right? I mean, I'm going to take your stereo. No, you can't. Why? Well, I don't want you to. Well, I do. The students in the classroom. Well, we're all going to cheat. The teacher said, I've been teaching moral relativism all this time. Values clarification. What is your value? Well, the students say, we value cheating. And the teacher says, well, I don't. This is my classroom, and we're not going to cheat. Well, that's not what moral relativism says, right? Suddenly they have to change the rules. And it's might makes right. I have the power, I'm going to dictate that you can't cheat. That's the morality you end up with if you're a moral relativist. If someone denies that goodness and values really exist outside of us, then the Cambodian dictator Pol Pot was not really wrong in thinking it was good to commit genocide on his own people, killing 21% of the Cambodian population. that really happened. He was just different. If moral relativism is true, then Pol Pot's morality is different from yours in the same way that some people like chocolate ice cream and others like vanilla. Does the relativist really believe that? I think if you push people, they might start to break down at this point and wonder, maybe there is something to this objective moral reality. Another thing you can say is, sometimes people will put up the problem with evil. Why is there so much suffering, so much evil in the world? And they may be an atheist who says that. And you say, well, hey, C.S. Lewis used this when he was an atheist. Here's what he said. My argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I call it unjust? If the whole show was bad and senseless from A to Z, so to speak, why did I, who was supposed to be part of the show, find myself in such violent reaction against it? Of course, I could have given up my idea of justice by saying it was nothing but a private idea of my own. But if I did that, then my argument against God collapsed. For the argument depended on saying that the world was really unjust. Not that it did not happen to please my private fancies. Thus, in the very act of trying to prove that God did not exist, in other words, that the whole of reality was senseless, I was forced to assume that one part of reality, namely my idea of justice, was full of sense, that there really was absolute justice. That's what the argument from the problem of evil hinges on. Consequently, atheism turns out to be too simple, because it can't explain why good exists. This is called the problem of good. So if someone comes to you with a problem of evil, that's a real thing that we have to deal with as Christians. Because we believe in all good, all-knowing, all-loving God. Right? So that's a hard problem. We can talk about that some other time. But first, ask them, well, let's look at the problem of good and come up with an explanation for that first. And then we can look at the problem of evil. Because they have to go together. You can't just take one of those two. So, does that answer your question?
Oh, yeah.
Great. So you can read the objection from evolutionary psychology. That would be your home. All right. Well, I want to. If you have to go at this point, well, I'll let you go. I think there are a couple more questions we can take. Before we close up shop. Yeah.
Just want to ask you a question. People say they're atheists. Do you think there's a real reason for them to say that they're atheists after they've been born Catholic, in the Catholic faith? And I tried to ask this person, why do you say you're an atheist? And she couldn't answer why. She just said,
That's a good question to ask. Why are you an atheist? Because there can be many different reasons. Some of it has to do with being an experience that they've had against, being harmed by the church or someone representing God. Other times it's a very intellectual thing. They think that science can explain all of reality or something like that. So I think if they don't know why, then maybe they just kind of slid into it, not through a reasoned argument, but just kind of like I have. I just sort of went with the flow and didn't really think about the issues. And I think those people, you really want to reach out to them, with evidence, and to talk to them about reasons to believe, and to have them take a second look, because maybe they hadn't heard any of what I just presented or anything like it. Yes.
I didn't hear you use the expression intelligent design. Was that by
Okay.
design?
Well, the
How does it
intelligent
differ?
design movement is kind of a big tent, and it includes some groups that have arguments that I don't think are sound. Arguments dealing with, some of them are young earth creationists, for example, and they deny a lot of the science that I just presented. Others argue against evolutionary biology, which I think is extremely sound, on the basis of, how can we explain this or that? Now, evolutionary biology doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain how life came from non-life. It doesn't explain all the things that we could ask. But it does have evidence from 15 or 20 different disciplines supporting it independently. And I think that the phrase intelligent design is kind of loaded, right? But I do think we have clear evidence of a creator who has super intelligence and who has a purpose behind it. You could even say he's designing the universe, but through indirect causes, secondary causes. A Thomistic theology about God as creator says that he likes to use secondary causes to bring about order in creation. That it's not God's style to do like one-offs of every single species, let's say, if he can bring it about through, through natural laws that will accomplish the same thing. But there is a need for intervention by God for the creation of the human soul, which cannot evolve. That's immaterial because it can share in God's own life and know God, know immaterial reality. So, I don't have a problem with Catholics who accept other things than theistic evolution. Michael Behe wrote Darwin's Black Box. I've read that. I've also read the critiques of it and other people in the intelligent design movement. So, there could be healthy debate, and as Catholics, you can have a variety of opinions. Faithful Catholics can disagree about a lot of things in this area. But I think what we need to teach in the school system is something that does justice, full justice to all the scientific disciplines. We don't want to be sort of being afraid of science. There's nothing in science that is a threat to the Catholic faith. Full stop. Authentically done science, which is always, the conclusions of science are always, have provisional. They're all provisional because new research can find new things, right? But we need to view the scientific disciplines as a means to achieving truth. And God created the book of nature, just like He created the book of the Bible and Revelation. So those two things are always correctly interpreted, in both cases, are always going to say the same thing. Now,
off topic a little bit, but could you please repeat where to look up in your talk that you're going to deliver?
sure. If you go to, in the handout, it's, the URL is there, but it's thenewevangelist.com. And then you go to features, click on feature, and click on reasons to believe. And there'll be 5 or 6 talks that are PDF files and MP3 files of the radio programs. So it's on the very first page, there's a URL there, but it's thenewevangelist, all one word, .com. Click on features, and then reasons to believe. All right, well, we'll close it up, and I want to thank you all for coming, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow if you're able to come for change of pace. We'll be looking at the heart level issues of faith as confidence in God and encountering Him in the universe. Have a great night.